Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. The sky above Cather Prime burned like an open wound, streaked with the incandescent trails of falling debris and the dying glow of orbital platforms torn apart in silent bursts of fire. From the command bridge of the last operational Catherine Defense Station, Commander Hana stood rigid, gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles had turned pale against her lavender skin. The world beneath her feet, the world she had spent her entire life studying, nurturing under, was being torn apart piece by piece, and she could do nothing except watch. The station shuddered as another shock wave rippled through its aging hull plating. Across the panoramic display, the symbols representing their orbital defenses winked out, one after another like candles smothered by an invisible hand. The Vorthan Empire's ships cut through them effortlessly, as though swatting aside children's toys rather than multi-billion credit military installations. "Commander, we've lost sectors 7 through 12. The voice came from her communications officer, but it trembled so violently that Hana nearly didn't recognize it. The young man's eyes darted in panic across flickering readouts. "The Voron fleet is advancing on all fronts." Of course they were. The Vorthans were conquerors, brutal, relentless, and almost mechanical in their efficiency. They swept through star systems with a cold confidence that came from centuries of unchallenged dominance. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They conquered, enslaved, and consumed. 3 months ago, they had demanded Cather Prime's unconditional surrender. Her people, brilliant, peaceful, curious, and painfully naive, had refused, believing diplomacy or delay could spare them. Instead, they had triggered an invasion that now choked their world in fire. Hannah swallowed hard and forced her voice to remain calm. "How many evacuation ships made it out?" "Approximately 40% of the civilian population, Commander." 40%, meaning 60%, millions, were still planetside, huddled in subterranean shelters or trapped in cities where the Vorthans were preparing to land ground forces. Hana's mind flashed with terrible images from other worlds conquered by the Vorthan Empire. Footage of burned settlements, entire species rounded into forced labor camps, children separated from parents, never seen again. She clenched her jaw and pushed the memories down. Another officer spun toward her. "Commander, Dr. Minho is requesting permission to activate the emergency beacon." Hana blinked. The emergency beacon. She had nearly forgotten it existed. An old relic installed by their ancestors generations ago, back when their species first ventured into the stars. It had been built on an idealistic principle. If the unthinkable ever occurs, we send this beacon out into the cosmos. Perhaps someone, anyone, will listen. She exhaled slowly. "Does it even work?" "Dr. Minho says it does," the officer replied, voice thin. "But he also says there's no guarantee anyone will respond. The beacon sends randomized distress transmissions based on nearby civilizations with plausible technological levels. Randomized, desperate, unreliable. But what choice did they have?" Outside the bridge window, one of their last orbital defense towers erupted in a silent explosion, scattering burning metal into the void. The blips on her tactical display were dwindling rapidly. One ship left, then only the station. "Hana," someone whispered. 6 hours, maybe. 6 hours until the Vorthans finish wiping out their space defenses. 6 hours until they began bombing cities. 6 hours until the genocide began. Her decision crystallized. Tell him to activate it. Deep within the station's lower decks, amid tangled cabling and humming generators, Dr. Minho worked with frantic precision. Sparks jumped from the ancient device as it powered up for the first time in nearly a century. Long, unused circuits flared to life, bathing the small lab in an eerie blue glow. Minho, normally a calm, soft-spoken scientist, felt sweat beating down his temples. He had never imagined his life's work would end with him trying to send a last-ditch cry for help into a disinterested universe. The beacon display flickered and scrolled through dozens of potential recipients, civilizations scattered across local star clusters, some known, many unknown. Some were flagged as hostile, others were too technologically primitive to help. A handful might have been friendly, but lacked military capability. He pressed his palms together. Please. It wasn't a prayer, not exactly, just a whispered plea into the void. Someone, anyone, help us. With a deep breath, he activated the transmission. A pulse of faster-than-light energy shot outward, carrying a simple message encoded in the universal trade language. This is Cather Prime of the Catherine Republic. Our world is under attack by the Vorthan Empire. Our defenses are failing. Civilian population in immediate danger. Any assistance will be gratefully accepted. We are peaceful people facing extinction. Please help us. The message jumped star to star, traveling farther in a single hour than the Catherine civilization had ever managed in its history. 17 different star systems received it. 16 of them dismissed it. The Altarian Confederacy filed it under internal affairs. The Nexus Trade Alliance marked it as non-commercial priority. The Crystal Singers of Vega 3 sent a brief, almost mocking reply. We wish you spiritual harmony in these trying times. Not one offered assistance. Not one mobilized a fleet. Not one lifted a finger. Cather Prime would stand alone, or so they believed. On the bridge of the defense station, Hana stood motionless as updates trickled in. Every passing minute, the Vorthans crept closer. Every passing minute, the hope of rescue dimmed. Commander, the communications officer said quietly, no new responses to the distress call. Of course there weren't. Catherine history had always been built upon scientific curiosity, diplomatic goodwill, the celebration of shared knowledge. They had never developed a war machine. They had never believed they needed one. Now they were learning, too late, that the universe did not reward idealism. A fresh explosion flashed across the viewport. Another orbital array gone. One officer choked back a sob. Another muttered a quiet apology to their family. Hana closed her eyes, steadied her breath, and reminded herself that she could not break, not while her people needed her. She turned to her crew, most of them barely holding themselves together. All stations, she said, forcing strength into her voice. Prepare for final defensive measures. Focus on protecting evacuation routes in civilian shelters. Do not surrender. She hesitated. Surrender would not save them. The Vorthans did not spare the helpless. The station lights flickered again. A console sparked. Hana raised her chin, readying herself for the end. Then, a sharp tone rang out. Commander, Dr. Minho is transmitting. He says, we received a response. The bridge fell silent. A response? Hana repeated cautiously. From who? The officer swallowed hard. A species called Terrahumans. Terrahumans. She searched her memory and found nothing. A small, recently spacefaring race from a blue planet. Marginal military, obscure, insignificant. But they had answered. Her heart fluttered, something dangerously close to hope. Put the message through. A new voice filled the bridge. Deep, steady, resolute. Cather Prime, this is Admiral Jiho Park of the Terran Defense Initiative. We have received your distress call. Help is coming. Hold position and protect civilians. ETA, 18 hours. The room fell into stunned silence. 18 hours. An eternity in war. But the fact that anyone was coming at all made her crew straighten, breathe deeper, sit taller. Even if these Terrahumans had only a handful of ships, even if they could offer only limited support, it was something. It was hope. Commander, Minho added through the static, they actually responded. Someone heard us. Hana allowed herself the smallest of smiles. All stations, she announced, steady as steel. We have confirmed Allied assistance en route. We only need to hold out a few more hours. She didn't know who the Terra humans were. She didn't know if they could really help. But what she also didn't know, not yet, was that her simple distress call had just awakened one of the most fearsome military powers in the local galaxy cluster. And those Terra humans, obscure and overlooked by the greater civilizations, were about to rewrite galactic history forever. Admiral Jiho Park had dealt with crises before. Border skirmishes, pirate incursions, even the tense standoff at the Centauri Expanse that nearly spiraled into interstellar war. But nothing in his long and decorated career had ever begun with a junior lieutenant bursting into his ready room without knocking. Lieutenant Yuna Lee's face was flushed, breath short, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and urgency. "Sir," she said, holding up a datapad, "we've received a transmission, an emergency one." Park leaned back in his chair, brows raised. "Unusual for a quiet Thursday." "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "It's alien, sir. Originating from about 30 light-years away. Species designation, Catherine Republic." Park frowned. "Catherine? I've never heard of them. Are they human settlers who rebranded themselves?" "We don't know, sir," Yuna admitted. The translation AI struggled, but the message is clear. Their world is under attack. Heavy civilian casualties, orbital bombardment. They claim they're facing extinction. She replayed the message. Park watched as lines of text scrolled across his console. Broken grammar, occasional mistranslations, but one phrase stood out like a blade. "Our brothers in the outer colonies request immediate assistance." Park sat up straighter. "Outer colonies?" "Yes, sir." That was the translation. To any other commander, it might have sounded like an error, an artifact of machine translation. But Park had spent his entire life defending humanity's fringe worlds. The phrase triggered instinct more than logic. "Lieutenant," he said slowly, "how many ships do we have in range?" "The entire Third Fleet, sir. 47 vessels, 6 dreadnoughts, 3 carriers, 13 cruisers, and the rest escort ships. They're conducting war games in the Proxima sector." Park stood. 47 ships, one of the most capable fleets humanity had ever assembled. "And ETA too. What did you say the system was called?" "Cathra system, sir. Approximately 18 hours at maximum FTL. 18 hours. Barely enough for him to prepare, but more than enough to matter." He looked again at the distress message, the desperate pleas woven between broken syntax and corrupted data fragments. Civilians dying, orbital bombardment, a peaceful species begging for help. Whether they were human colonists or not barely mattered. What mattered was that someone needed help, and they had asked humans. "Lieutenant Lee," he said, his voice calm, "prepare an immediate response." "Sir, shouldn't we contact Terra Command first for authorization?" Protocol demanded it. The chain of command required it. Paperwork insisted on it. But bureaucracy had no place in genocide. "Send the response," Park said, "then patch me through to Terra Command. I'll take responsibility." Yuna hesitated only a heartbeat before snapping to attention. "Yes, sir." Minutes later, across the cold void of space, a simple message raced through hyperspace toward the doomed world. "Cather Prime, this is Admiral Jiho Park of the Terran Defense Initiative. Help is coming. Hold position and protect civilians. ETA 18 hours. Park's words were steady, controlled, and sincere, but behind them was the weight of a decision that would ripple across the galaxy. A decision that woke sleeping giants. Terra Command did not respond with anger or reprimand, as some feared. Instead, they responded with stunned silence, then rapid-fire orders. By the time Park arrived in the main briefing hall aboard the TDS Harmony, senior officers were already assembling. The hollow table flickered to life, projecting the incomplete scans of Cathra Prime and the aggressive Vorthan signature patterns detected by the beacon. The commanders of the Third Fleet gathered, some grizzled veterans, others sharp young tacticians. Captain Kyong Kim of the dreadnought TDS Invictus broke the silence first. "Sir, The briefing materials mention human colonists under attack, but we have no records of settlements in that region. We don't, Park admitted. The translation is imperfect. It might be a lost colony. It might be a misunderstanding, but regardless, the situation is clear. He highlighted the distress message. Civilian shelters overrun. Orbital bombardment ongoing. A peaceful species outmatched by a military giant. Captain Sujin Nam of the stealth frigate TDS Phantom leaned forward, sharp-eyed. Sir, are we certain these are humans? Park slowly looked around the room. Does it matter? He asked. Silence. The unspoken answer, no, it does not. Humans did not ignore pleas for help. The Marine commander, Colonel Dong-hyun Choi, crossed his arms. Sir, my Marines are ready, but we need intel. What are we walking into? Unknown, Park said. Large fleet, heavy bombardment, significant ground presence. And we are responding with, just the Third Fleet? Choi asked. Park allowed himself a thin smile. No, not just the Third Fleet. He pressed a button. A new display appeared, one that made the entire room inhale sharply. Activation of Protocol 7 confirmed. Total mobilization underway. 5th Fleet en route. 8th Fleet deployed. Colonial Defense Forces mobilizing. Reserve battle groups launching. Yuna entered at that moment, datapad in hand. Sir, new updates. Current count, 137 vessels committed to the Cathra response. Reinforcements arriving every hour. Captain Nam let out a quiet whistle. That's not a relief force. That's an armada. Park nodded. Exactly, because the message described genocide, because innocent people are dying, and because humanity does not send token assistance, we send everything. Hours later, throughout the Sol system and its colonies, entire starports roared to life. Engineering crews sprinted across docks, loading munitions. Fighters were rolled into carriers. Shield cores were tuned to maximum output. On Mars, 6 long-range destroyers departed in formation. From Jupiter Station, 12 heavy cruisers launched from their magnetic catapults. From Europa, the Marine Division boarded dropships, preparing for ground operations before they even knew the terrain. In dozens of sectors, smaller defense forces joined the swelling tide. Everywhere, one message echoed. Respond to Cathra Prime. Protect civilians. Protocol 7 in effect. Somewhere deep inside that enormous machine of war, Park felt the weight of the moment settle onto his shoulders. Not fear, not regret, responsibility. He stared at the star map. Cathra Prime highlighted in dim red. A world hanging on by threads. A world no one else cared about. A world that had whispered into the void. And humanity had whispered back. We hear you. Back on Cathra Prime, the situation worsened by the hour. Hannah watched helplessly as the last orbital defense tower died in a plume of orange flame. We have incoming Vorthan landing craft. First wave estimated at 40,000 troops. 40,000. Against what? A handful of militia. Scientists with repurposed tools. Any updates from the Terra humans? She asked. Dr. Minho's voice crackled through the comm. Yes, Commander, they say more ships are joining their relief force. Over 100 now. 100 ships? Hannah stared at the data, confused and shaken. What kind of species must they be to send 100 warships for a distress signal from strangers? We don't know what their capabilities are, Minho added. But they responded. That alone is more than anyone else did. Hannah looked at her exhausted crew, faces hollow, eyes dimmed but flickering with small embers of hope. All stations, she announced softly. Help is on the way. We hold until they arrive. For our people, for our children, for our future. Her voice did not waver. But deep inside, she wondered what sort of beings answered with such force and certainty. What kind of civilization hears a cry for help and responds with an armada? She would soon learn. The galaxy would soon learn. Because the Terra humans were coming, and once they committed, there was no turning back. The transition from hyperspace was never gentle. But the coordinated exit of dozens of Terran warships was something else entirely, an event that rippled through the void like the beat of a cosmic war drum. One by one, ships the size of cities slid back into real space, shedding streaks of white-blue plasma as their engines cooled from FTL burnout. The first vessel to appear was the TDS Harmony, Admiral Jiho Park's flagship. Its hull, sleek, dark, reinforced with composite armor capable of withstanding nuclear torpedoes, glimmered like a leviathan emerging from the deep. Then came the dreadnoughts, 6 of them, each dwarfing the Harmony tenfold. Then the carriers, their launch bays already open. Then the cruisers, the escorts, the supply barges, the medical frigates, the stealth ships that arrived without a ripple. And still, more kept arriving. From the bridge of the Dominion, the Vorthon flagship, General Thane watched the sensors with growing irritation that slowly curdled into something unfamiliar. Fear. "Report," he snapped. The sensor officer swallowed. "Sir, we're detecting multiple spatial anomalies, very large signatures, unknown configuration." "Refugee ships?" the general asked, already bored, already dismissive. "No, sir, these readings, these are warships." "How many?" The officer stared in disbelief. 30, no, 40. Wait, more appearing. 60, 70. General Thane's claws curled. Impossible. No neighboring power possessed a fleet of this size. The Vorthan Empire had crushed every major rival in this quadrant generations ago. "Identify their species." "Unknown, sir. Their designs are not in any database." Thane leaned closer to the holo display. The ships emerging from hyperspace formed a flawless spearhead formation, shields overlapping, weapons charged, fighters deployed in swarms like flocks of metallic birds. This was not a recon force, not a peacekeeping group. This was a war machine, precise, overwhelming, and entirely deliberate. Whoever they were, they had come prepared for total annihilation. A chill crawled beneath Thane's exoskeleton. Down on Cather Prime's battered command station, Dr. Minho nearly collapsed when new sensor readings poured in. "Commander Hana, you need to see this." Hana rushed to the console, expecting more Borthan reinforcements. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. The display showed dozens, no, scores, of titanic ships entering the system. Their signatures dwarfed those of the Vorthans. Some were so massive that Catherine's sensors struggled to categorize them. 67 contacts, and still climbing, Minho whispered. "Are they the Terra humans?" Hana asked. Minho nodded slowly. "The timing matches exactly." Hana stared, stunned. "Why would they send so many ships? We thought they might send 5, maybe 10. Minho shook his head. "Commander, I think we accidentally woke up something far more powerful than we realized." On the Harmony, Lieutenant Yuna Lee turned to Admiral Park. "Sir, the fleet has exited hyperspace. All ships reporting operational." Park nodded. "Open a channel. Broadcast system-wide." Moments later, every ship, human, Catherine, and Vorthon, heard the same chillingly calm voice. "This is Admiral Jiho Park of the Terran Defense Initiative. Vorthan forces, you have attacked our allies and committed acts of genocide. You have 30 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from this system, or we will remove you." There was no shouting, no bravado, just the quiet confidence of someone who commanded an armada capable of reshaping the map of the galaxy. General Thane bared his teeth in fury. "All frequencies, respond!" An officer activated the comms. "Unknown species. This conquest is authorized by the Vorthan Empire. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of defying Imperial law." The humans responded almost instantly. 30 seconds expired. All Terran ships, weapons free. The impact was immediate. In space, the sky ignited. The Terran fleet moved like a single creature. Dreadnoughts advanced in a broad line, carriers stationed behind them launching wave after wave of strike fighters, while cruisers flanked the formation like wolves circling prey. On the TDS Invictus, Captain Kyung Kim issued the first firing order. All batteries, target the lead Vorthen cruiser. Full-spread tungsten penetrators, fire. 8 railgun slugs, each several tons of compressed tungsten, blasted from the Invictus. They crossed the void at a significant fraction of light speed and hit the Vorthen cruiser in perfect sequence. The cruiser's shields flared once, then collapsed. The slugs tore through the hull as if ripping through paper. Internal reactors detonated in a bloom of blue-white fire. The cruiser shattered into molten fragments. Across the human fleet, dozens of other ships opened fire. Vorthen vessels began dying so quickly that the tactical displays struggled to keep up. From the Harmony, Admiral Park observed with emotionless focus. "Maintain formation," he said. "Prioritize capital ships. Protect the civilian planet." "Yes, sir." On the TDS Unbreakable, humanity's largest dreadnought, Captain Wan Ji Han tracked a Vorthon battleship attempting to flee toward the planet. "Not on my watch," she muttered. "Spinal mount cannon, fire." The main weapon roared. An entire reactor's output condensed into one unstoppable beam. It struck the battleship mid-hull. The Vorthen vessel simply tore in half. "Target the next," Han said coldly. "They attacked innocents. There will be consequences." Far ahead of the primary line, the TDS Phantom slipped past enemy scanners like a ghost. Captain Sujin Nam specialized in surgical strikes and high-value kills. "Ma'am," her weapons officer said, "we have a clean shot on the enemy flagship." "No friendly ships in the line of fire?" "None." "Fire." 2 antimatter torpedoes streaked forward and embedded themselves in the Vorthen dreadnought. The resulting explosion was so bright it cast shadows across the surface of Cather Prime. General Thane and the entire Vorthen command structure vanished in an instant. On the ground below, Catherine defenders watched in awe. What are they?" one whispered. "Hana, I don't think we called for help," she whispered, voice trembling. Dr. Minho nodded slowly, his face pale. "I think we accidentally woke up one of the galaxy's apex military powers." In orbit, the first battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the entire Vorthen invasion fleet was destroyed or disabled. Not a single human ship had been lost. Only 3 Terran vessels reported minor damage. Terran fighters were still circling, hunting for escape pods or stragglers. Admiral Park leaned forward. "Open channel, planet-wide." Lieutenant Yuna nodded. "Cather Prime, this is Admiral Park. The immediate orbital threat has been neutralized. We detect Vorthen forces on the surface. Do you require ground assistance?" Hannah's voice broke slightly as she responded. "Admiral, understood. Marine landing operations begin immediately. Hang tight down there. The cavalry has arrived." And far across the galaxy, other civilizations began receiving whispers, rumors of an unknown species that answered distress calls with overwhelming force. A species that protected strangers as if they were kin. A species whose fleets moved like storms and whose soldiers fought like legends. Humanity had entered the stage, and the galaxy would never be the same. There were battles in the galaxy measured in days, others in weeks, even months, wars that dragged across star systems in sluggish tides of attrition. But what happened above Cather Prime that day would be recorded not in days or hours, but in minutes. 47 of them. 47 minutes that shattered an empire. 47 minutes that introduced a new apex predator into the galactic stage. 47 minutes that proved humanity was not simply another species among the stars. They were something else entirely. The opening blow. The Vorthan fleet had barely begun to recover from the shock of losing its flagship when the Terran dreadnoughts unleashed their full broadside. From the bridge of the TDS Invictus, Captain Kyung Kim stood with his hands clasped behind his back, expression serene amid the unfolding chaos. "Helm, maintain forward vector," he ordered. "Weapons, adjust firing solution to the next cruiser along the axis." "Yes, Captain." He observed the tactical display. Vorthon formations were collapsing, line integrity gone, chain of command obliterated. Their ships built for intimidation and brute force were now flailing. Human ships, meanwhile, moved like a single organism, each vessel adjusting position with millimetric precision. Fighter wings acted as tendrils screening for threats, while cruisers pulsed out electronic warfare barrages, blinding Vorthan targeting systems. Fire main batteries. Kim's voice was soft, almost gentle. The Invictus's railguns spat death again. 8 tungsten slugs, each the size of a shuttle, fired at relativistic velocities. The air inside the gun deck superheated, causing artificial tornadoes around the magnet coils. The slugs tore through another Vorthan cruiser. No shield could hold. No armor could survive. Kim nodded once. Next, firestorms in the void. Elsewhere, in the heart of the Terran formation, Captain Wanji Han commanded the behemoth that was the TDS Unbreakable. The Dreadnought's spinal-mounted beam cannon, one of only 4 in human space, was charging for its next shot. Target, enemy battleship, bearing 097, the gunnery officer announced. Han narrowed her eyes. Has it begun powering its FTL? Yes, ma'am. Then let's make sure it doesn't go anywhere. With a gesture, she gave the order. Fire! The main gun discharged, an event so violent that containment fields rippled visibly across the Unbreakable's hull. A lance of white-hot energy sliced through the void, clipping the fleeing Vorthon battleship. It split cleanly down the middle, as though a cosmic scalpel had dissected it. Confirmed kill, Han said. Confirmed, Captain. Good. Find me another. The ghost in the dark. On the other side of the chaos, the stealth frigate, TDS Phantom, drifted like a shadow. Captain Sujin Nam sat in a dimly lit command chair, her voice barely above a whisper. Enemy reinforcements forming rally point near debris cluster Gamma 2. Can they detect us? Her helmsman asked. Not unless they suddenly evolve 3 technological epochs. Her ship was designed for one thing: decapitation, removing command ships, crippling enemy coordination, sowing terror through the ranks. When we fired on the flagship, the weapons officer said, I detected several priority targets fleeing the blast radius. Nam's eyes sharpened. Plot torpedo solution. Minimum profile entry. The Phantom's torpedoes did not blaze through space. They did not announce themselves with heat signatures or engine trails. They slid silently, hidden in the electromagnetic noise of the battlefield. 2 minutes later, 3 Vorthon cruisers vanished in synchronized bursts of annihilation. 8 officers of rank among them. Nam exhaled slowly. That should accelerate their panic. The dragons. The Terran fighter wings, the dragons, were in the thickest part of the chaos. Squadron leader Taman Yu dove his craft between the burning remains of a Vorthan destroyer and the plasma wash of a Terran carrier, weaving through shrapnel that could have shredded him in an instant. Dragon leader to all dragons, he barked. Target the heavy cruiser cluster. Aim for their engines. Let's cut their escape. Dozens of fighters streaked across the battlefield like streaks of lightning. Yu's fighters shuddered as flak fire burst around him. Dragon 3, report. I'm hit, leader, came the strained reply. Yu glanced at the display. Can you make it to the carrier? There was a long pause. Negative, leader. Engines gone. Life support failing. Yu's throat tightened. Eject. Another pause. No, sir. I can still steer. Yu's eyes widen. Dragon 3, don't you dare. I'll make it count, the pilot whispered. Tell my family I did my duty. The damaged fighter banked sharply, straight toward the Vorthan battleship. Yu shouted, Dragon 3, don't! But it was too late. The fighter slammed into the battleship's bridge at full burn. The explosion tore through its command core. The battleship died within seconds. Yu gritted his teeth. Dragon 3 confirmed. All dragons, you heard him, make every shot count. What the Vorthans saw next would become legend. Human pilots diving fearlessly, flying through weapons fire that no sane species would ever attempt. They fought not like soldiers, but like beings who refused to allow evil to breathe. The final minutes. By the 30-minute mark, the Vorthan fleet was in total disarray. By the 35-minute mark, Over 70% of their ships were destroyed. By the 40th minute, the Terran forces had formed an orbital shield around Cather Prime so tight that nothing, no ship, no missile, no escape pod, could get through without permission. On the Dominion's debris field, what remained of the Vorthan officers transmitted frantic calls for retreat grants that would never come. At minute 47, the last operational Vorthan destroyer was disabled by a precision strike from the TDS Resolute. Its engines went dark, and its crew surrendered. The battle was over. 47 minutes. Round 2 begins, but peace did not come immediately. Alerts chimed across the Terran fleet. Admiral Park, Lieutenant Una announced, "We are detecting a second Vorthon fleet entering the system. Approximately 50 additional warships." Park nodded slowly. "They think we sent a small relief force. They have no idea what they're flying into." "Sir, their ETA is 40 minutes. Signal the fleet," Park said. "Combat readiness, round 2. And the message to the Vorthans?" Park allowed a small sigh. "Give them a chance to surrender." A transmission was sent. "Vorthan reinforcements. Withdraw now and you will be spared. Continue your aggression, and we will neutralize you." The Vorthans responded with threats, declarations of imperial law, and boasts of overwhelming strength. So humanity responded the only way they could. "All ships, engage." The second slaughter. Captain Yunji Yun, commanding the carrier TDS Valkyrie, watched as hundreds of fighters launched from her decks. "All squadrons," she commanded, "target capital ships and troop transports. Do not allow reinforcements to reach the surface." Her pilots responded with a unified roar. Wave after wave of human fighters streaked toward the advancing Vorthon formation. The Vorthans couldn't comprehend their aggression. These were tiny fighters, no bigger than escape skiffs, yet they moved with suicidal precision, weaving through point defense fire and ripping apart ships with tactical micro-torpedoes. Yu's voice crackled through the command channel. "Dragon leader to Valkyrie, heavy cruiser disabled." "Copy," Yunji replied. "Proceed with strike pattern Theta." The Vorthan fleet broke much faster the second time. Their confidence shattered, their morale in ruins, their command structure non-existent. Within 30 minutes, the second fleet was crippled. Within 40, it was annihilated. "Admiral," Una said quietly, "all hostile forces have been eliminated." Park nodded. "Prepare for ground operations." The cavalry descends. In the drop pods of the Terran Marine Corps, Master Sergeant Jinwoo Park braced himself as atmospheric friction turned the pod's exterior into a streak of molten light. "Listen up," he barked over the comms. "Intelligence says 40,000 Vorthan troops are on the surface. Our job, get between them and the civilians. Rules of engagement: if they point a weapon at a civilian, you put them down." The pods slammed into the soil of Cather Prime like meteor strikes. Jinwoo kicked the hatch open and immediately returned fire at Vorthon troops entrenched on a nearby ridge. "Contact front. Let's move." Human Marines poured from drop pods with flawless discipline. Railgun fire cracked. Pulse rifles hummed. The Vorthans, expecting to fight terrified scientists, instead met armored soldiers who moved like predators unleashed. Private Kyung-min Lee set up the portable rail cannon. "Sergeant, multiple contacts on the upper floors. Take them out." The cannon hummed, then fired. A tungsten slug punched through the building, silencing the Vorthan squad instantly. "Good shot," Jinwoo growled. "Push forward." The Terran storm. Across the planet, similar scenes unfolded. Lieutenant So-Young Kim led a split assault to rescue civilians held at gunpoint. Corporal Jang's squad flanked a Vorthan firing line, ending the battle in under 5 minutes. Human medics pulled terrified Catherine families from collapsed shelters. Everywhere they went, the Terrans fought with a fury tempered by discipline. The Vorthans had no defense against them. They had conquered dozens of worlds, but none had humanity. As reports poured in, Admiral Park received the final update. "Sir, all Vorthan ground forces neutralized or captured. Civilian casualties minimal." Park exhaled. "Send this to Cather Prime. Their world is free." The surface of Cather Prime was a nightmare of smoke. Shattered buildings, scorched streets, and desperate civilians scurrying through rubble-choked corridors. The Vorthons had landed across multiple districts, sweeping through neighborhoods with the ruthless efficiency of a species accustomed to subjugation. They herded Catherine civilians toward processing centers, shot anyone who resisted, and destroyed infrastructure deliberately to break morale. But they hadn't encountered Terrans yet. They had no idea what was coming. The drop. Master Sergeant Jin-Woo Park hit the ground like a meteor. His drop pod carved a glowing scar into the soil before slamming to a halt. Hydraulic bolts detonated. The door blasted outward. Smoke hissed away as he stepped into the chaos, pulse rifle raised, armor gleaming with the reflected fire of the ruined city. "Contact front," he shouted. Pulse beams scorched the air as Vorthon soldiers fired wildly, expecting panicked scientists. But the humans were not panicked. They were not civilians. They were the Terran Marine Corps. Marines, spread, containment line. Jinwoo's voice cut through the comm channels with commanding force. Private Kyungmin Lee unfolded the portable rail cannon with practiced speed. "Sergeant, multiple hostiles in the upper structure. Send them a hello." The portable cannon hummed, then crack! A tungsten slug tore through the third-floor facade like a fist through paper, silencing the firing position instantly. "Hit confirmed," Lee said. "Good. Push forward." The Marines advanced with surgical precision. Their movement was fluid, too fluid for the Vorthons to track. One team laid suppressive fire while another flanked. Grenade drones darted through shattered windows and detonated, clearing rooms in controlled bursts. The Vorthons tried to regroup. They died where they stood. Within 5 minutes, the ridge assault was over. The City of Shadows. On the other side of the capital, Lieutenant So-Young Kim and her platoon navigated a residential district swallowed in smoke. A frightened Catherine child ran from a collapsed shelter, chased by 2 Vorthon soldiers. Kim didn't hesitate. She aimed, fired twice. Both Vorthons fell before they understood what had hit them. "Move," she commanded. "Check the building." Corporal Jang approached an apartment tower where dozens of Catherine civilians were hiding, trapped inside as Vorthons swept the streets. "Ma'am," Jang said, pointing, "enemy positions surrounding that structure. Looks like 20 hostiles." Kim crouched behind broken metal scaffolding, studying the layout with a predator's intensity. "They're using the civilians as shields," she muttered, her jaw flexed. This was the kind of tactic she hated most. Kim tapped her comm. "Corporal, take your squad around the rear. Wait for my mark." "Yes, ma'am." She looked to the rest of her team. "We're taking the front, fast and loud." A few Marines exchanged glances. "That's a lot of enemy fire, Lieutenant," one said. Kim smiled grimly. "That's why it'll work. These Vorthons have been executing civilians for 3 days. It's time they met actual soldiers." She raised her rifle and sprinted from cover. Her Marines followed like a wave of iron. "Contact! Go, go, go!" The Vorthons turned just in time to see Terran Marines tearing down the street, weapons firing with disciplined bursts. Their return fire was scattered, panicked, ineffective. Then Corporal Jang's squad struck from behind. Caught between 2 human elements, the Vorthon detachment lasted less than 5 minutes. "Building secured," Jang reported. Kim nodded. "Get medics in here, civilians first." Inside, terrified Catherine families huddled in stairwells. When they saw armored humans enter, panic surged, until one Marine knelt, slowly removing his helmet. "We're here to help," he said gently, in translated Catherine speech. Gasps filled the room. A Catherine mother clutched her daughter. You came," she whispered. "Always," the Marine replied. "The processing facilities." But the darkest chapters of the occupation lay elsewhere. Scattered throughout the city were 3 Vorthon processing centers, a sanitized term for facilities designed to categorize, imprison, and eliminate large populations quickly. When Terran reconnaissance drones captured live footage of civilians being herded toward containment grids, Admiral Park's voice hardened like steel. "Colonel Choi," he commanded, "neutralize those facilities. All of them." "Yes, sir." The first facility. At the largest site, hundreds of Catherine civilians were crammed into fenced courtyards. Vorthons barked orders, shoving families apart. Some civilians were already lined against a wall, execution style. The Vorthon commander raised his weapon, and then the sky tore open. Dozens of Terran drop pods screamed downward like fireballs, slamming into the ground with earth-shaking force. The nearest Vorthons staggered back. What are... The first pod burst open, and Master Sergeant Jinwoo Park stepped out like a knight of war. "Marines!" he roared. "Breach! Breach! Breach!" Pod doors blasted open all around him, and Terran soldiers surged forth in perfect unity. The Vorthons fired. Their bolts bounced off Terran armor. The Marines kept walking. Flank left. "Push that corner. Live civilians. Watch your fire." Jinwoo slammed an armored fist into a Vorthon's jaw, knocking the alien unconscious. He fired twice at another before kicking down the central gate. "Catherine civilians," he shouted. "We're here to get you out." A trembling elder Catherine stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You actually came," she whispered. "We thought the galaxy had abandoned us." Jinwoo knelt, offering a steady arm. "Not on humanity's watch." The second facility. Lieutenant Kim's platoon hit the next center with coordinated brutality. Drone footage showed Vorthon guards preparing mass executions. Kim's voice dropped into a tone her Marines recognized, a tone that meant the enemy would not survive the next minute. "Breach charges on both sides. We're taking this place in 90 seconds. "Ma'am, that's impossible." 90 seconds. They moved. The charges detonated with synchronized thunder. Marines flooded into the compound, cutting through stunned guards with precision that bordered on art. Two Vorthons turned their weapons toward a group of cowering children. Kim shot both through the throat before they could pull the trigger. "Nobody touches the civilians," she growled. One Catherine child stared up at her in awe. "Are you angels?" Kim snorted. "No, just humans." The third facility. The final processing site was the most fortified and the most horrifying. Vorthons were preparing to ignite a containment grid, a device designed to kill thousands in a controlled burn. Colonel Choi himself led the charge. "That grid fires in 60 seconds, he shouted. "Move!" Marines sprinted through enemy fire, bullets sparking off their armor. Choi tackled a Vorthon technician, slamming him into a console and ripping the control module from his hands. "Deactivated," he barked to his tech specialist. "I'm trying. 40 seconds. Hold them off," Choi roared. They formed a defensive circle around the console. Vorthons crashed against their formation. Humans held steady. 20 seconds. Keep firing. 10 seconds. A pulse rifle overheated. A Marine switched to his combat knife without hesitation. 5, 4, 3, click. "Grid deactivated, Colonel." Choi exhaled. "Secure the civilians." The turning of the tide. As hours passed, Terran forces carved through Vorthon lines like blades through silk. They liberated shelters, evacuated the wounded, restored damaged power grids, and secured every major city. By nightfall, Vorthon resistance collapsed completely. Some surrendered, most fled into the wilds. A few fought to the last breath, but none slowed the advance of the Terran Marines. Drone feeds updated rapidly. Facility 1, secured facility. 2, secured facility. 3, secured capital, cleared city district. 9, cleared planetary defense grid, back online. Admiral Park received the final ground report from Colonel Choi. "Sir, all Vorthon ground forces neutralized or captured. Civilian casualties lower than projected." Park allowed himself a breath of relief. "Send this to Commander Hana. Cather Prime is free." The moment that changed them. When Hana heard the words, heard the human admiral declare her world liberated, she sank to her knees, not out of weakness, but out of overwhelming relief. The last thing she expected was salvation. Yet here they were, the Terra humans, soldiers forged by fire, arriving like a storm, fighting as if the lives of strangers mattered as much as their own. Hana whispered into the comm, "Thank you. Thank you, Admiral Park, for saving us." Park's voice was steady, warm, resolute. "You asked for help," he said. "That was enough." The dawn that rose over Cather Prime the next day felt unreal. For the first time in nearly a week, the horizon was not split by bombardment trails or lit by the glow of orbital destruction. Instead, soft sunlight filtered through the dust clouds, revealing cities that were bruised, broken, but alive. And among the wreckage walked Terran Marines, engineers, medics, and officers. The apex military power of the local galaxy cluster, distributing water, repairing generators, comforting terrified refugees, and escorting families to safety. The war was over. And now came the part humans took just as seriously, rebuilding what had been broken. The meeting. The temporary Catherine Council Chamber, once a place for scientific debate and diplomatic planning, had been hastily repaired by Terran engineering teams. Reinforced beams replaced shattered supports. Portable lights illuminated the vast room. Medics treated the wounded in side chambers. Commander Hana stood at the front of the long table, accompanied by Dr. Minho and the remaining members of her leadership council. She had rehearsed what she might say, words of gratitude, words of awe, words of disbelief. But as Admiral Jiho Park entered the chamber, all of her practice lines dissolved. Because he did not walk like a conqueror. He did not radiate the arrogance of power. He walked in with quiet humility, his helmet tucked under his arm, his officers following respectfully behind him. His calm, steady eyes met Hana's with solemn understanding. "Commander Hana," he said with a slight bow, "I am glad to see you safe." Hana's throat tightened. "Admiral, I don't know how to thank you. When we sent that distress signal, we hoped someone might answer. Maybe a small team. Maybe a handful of ships. We never expected." She gestured helplessly toward the window, where Terran ships still patrolled in steady formation. "This," Admiral Park offered a gentle smile. "Commander, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Our translation systems initially interpreted your message as originating from human colonists in distress." Dr. Minho blinked. You thought we were humans?" "At first," Park admitted. "But even after we realized you were an entirely different species, it changed nothing. You asked for help. That was enough." Hana lowered her head, overwhelmed. Dr. Minho stared at the Admiral as though studying a rare phenomenon. "You mobilized your largest fleet in decades," Minho said, his voice trembling. "For people you didn't even know?" Park considered his words carefully before answering. "In our culture, we have a belief. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. When innocent lives are at risk, humanity does not stand aside." Captain Kyung Kim, who had commanded the TDS Invictus during the battle, stepped forward and added, "Commander, what did your records say about humans before this incident?" Minho checked his datapad with a weak laugh. "Very little. You were listed as a minor, newly spacefaring species with a small military footprint." Lieutenant Yuna Lee raised an eyebrow. "And what do your records say now?" Minho looked around the room and exhaled slowly. "That we were catastrophically wrong. Humanity possesses one of the most powerful militaries we have ever seen. Your tactics, coordination, technology, nothing in our archives compares." Park nodded, but with no pride in his tone, only responsibility. "We've had a very long time to prepare for large-scale conflict. When we fight to end the threat decisively. But that's not the important part right now." He tapped the tablet in his hand. A holographic map of Cather Prime shimmered to life above the table. Repaired infrastructure glowed blue. Damaged sectors flashed yellow or red. "The important part," Park said, "is rebuilding your world." Rebuilding. Commander Taiho Yu, chief engineer of the TDS Invictus, stepped forward. "Commander Hana," he said, projecting construction data into the hologram, "we've assessed structural damage across all major cities. Critical infrastructure, power, water, communications, can be restored within 3 to 5 weeks. The Terran Engineering Corps has 12 colonial teams inbound. You're rebuilding our cities? Hana whispered. Of course, Tai-Ho Yu replied, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Dr. So-Young Lim, Chief Medical Officer, followed. Our medical teams have already stabilized most of the injured. Civilian casualties are far lower than expected. Under 10,000. Hana covered her mouth, tears rising. 10,000? It was still a terrible number, yet she had prepared herself for millions. So-Young bowed her head respectfully. Your evacuation efforts saved many lives, Commander. Hana turned back to Park. What can we possibly give you for this? Resources? Trade? Territory? Park blinked. Commander, you owe us nothing. What? Hana whispered, stunned. We did not come for payment, Park said calmly. We came because people needed help. Minho sputtered. Admiral, that makes no strategic sense. You committed enormous military resources for a species that could offer nothing in return. How do you justify this to your government? Park smiled kindly. Dr. Minho, you're thinking like a politician. My government sent us because it was the right thing to do. Hana stared, her heart pounding. This species, these Terrans, were unlike anything she had ever imagined. A new alliance. As the meeting drew to a close, Admiral Park straightened and placed a small data tablet on the table. Commander Hana, he said, the Terran Defense Initiative would like to extend a formal alliance proposal. Mutual defense, humanitarian cooperation, shared principles. Hana didn't hesitate. Admiral, yes, we accept. Immediately and gratefully. Park raised a hand gently. Commander, you may wish to consult your people. Alliance with humanity means upholding principles, protection of civilians, assistance to species in distress, opposition to imperial aggression. These are values we already hold, Minho said firmly. We simply lack the strength to act on them. Park nodded. Then we'll stand together. 3 days later, in a ceremony broadcast across both species networks, Commander Hana and Admiral Park signed the Terran-Catherine Alliance Charter. It was simple. No tributes, no territorial concessions, no hidden terms. Just a promise, a shared creed. If the innocent cry out, we answer. The galactic reverberations. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate. The Altarian Confederacy updated their intelligence files with alarm, noting humanity's sudden display of overwhelming power. The Nexus Trade Alliance opened discussions on commerce, treating humanity with newfound respect. The Crystal Singers sent poems of gratitude into the void. But the most significant reactions came from the small, peaceful civilizations scattered across quiet sectors of space, the ones who had long lived in fear of predatory empires like the Vorthans. Within a week, the DN Republic petitioned for alliance membership, citing decades of pirate oppression. Within 2 weeks, the Arcturus Collective, a civilization of artists and philosophers, requested mutual protection agreements. Within a month, 17 different species filed formal applications to join what diplomats began calling the Terran Alliance, a military coalition not based on conquest, not based on profit, but based on shared values. News networks struggled to define it. Humanity emerges as unpredictable force. Terrans display unmatched military response. Galaxy stunned. Humans fight for strangers. Even the Vorthan Empire, humiliated and terrified, announced strategic withdrawals from contested territories. Their citizens whispered about a new nightmare. The humans are coming. A new purpose. On Cather Prime, Hana stood in her rebuilt command center, gazing out at a skyline lined with Terran engineering drones. Human and Catherine's ships flew in coordinated patrols. Joint task forces trained together. Med teams worked beside Catherine's scientists to develop new emergency response protocols. Dr. Minho entered with a datapad. Commander, we've received 3 new alliance requests. Admiral Park is asking if Cather Prime can take on liaison responsibilities between applicants in Terran High Command. Hana smiled softly. We'll help however we can. Minho chuckled. Oh, and one civilization thought alliance meant they could request Terran support for conquering their neighbors. The admiral corrected them. Hana laughed, despite the fatigue. Yes, I imagine he did. Minho nodded. His exact words were, "We don't help people conquer others. We help people resist being conquered." The legacy of a distress call. Later that evening, Hannah visited one of the largest evacuation shelters, now a temporary recovery center. Children played in corners under Terran medical supervision. Marines distributed supplies, their massive armored frames softened by the gentle way they handed out food in blankets. A young Catherine child tugged at a Marine's armor. "Will you leave us?" she asked. The Marine knelt. "If someone tries to hurt you again," he said with a soft smile, "we'll be here before they land their first ship." Hana watched the exchange with a warm ache in her chest. Her people had been alone in the darkness, afraid, forgotten, facing extinction. But they sent one desperate signal into the void, and the void answered with humanity. The final message. As the sun set, Admiral Park stood beside Commander Hana on a balcony overlooking the restored capital. "Admiral," Hana said quietly, "why did you really come?" Park took a long breath, letting the orange light cast warm shadows across his face. "Because the universe is full of darkness," he said, "and sometimes all it takes to push it back is for someone to say, 'Not today.' Your people called for help. We just decided we wouldn't let evil win." He paused, then turned to her with a calm, resolute expression. "And Commander, humanity always answers." From that day forward, across the galaxy, a new saying took root, spoken in frightened whispers and hopeful prayers alike. When the good cry out, someone will answer. And when humanity answers, they bring everything.